I am Arthur. What if the first footsteps on a Caribbean shore were nothing like the clean legend you were taught? What if the truth began with confusion, careful smiles, and a map that did not match the world in front of it? Columbus expected the edge of Asia. He saw green islands, bright water, and people whose language he did not share. He wrote that they met his crew without fear and offered food, water, and woven cotton. His officers noticed gold rings in ears and a few small ornaments. In that instant, a powerful loop of hope snapped into place. Gold must be near, he decided, and the road to the Great Khan could not be far. The reality behind this first impression is even more fascinating, because each new step added clues and erased others. The shore was busy with life. Gardens grew cassava and maize. Canoes crossed channels with skill and speed. Fish dried on racks in the sun. The visitors believed they had reached the Indies and tried simple words and signs to ask for Cipango or Cathay. Their hosts answered with place names that meant nothing to European ears. Gifts moved in both directions. Beads and bells glittered. Parrots, fruit, and baskets changed hands. Everyone watched everyone, curious and cautious at once. Look closely at what he truly saw. He saw people who could swim like seals and steer long canoes through surf that would wreck a boat from Spain. He saw villages where hammocks hung between poles, where cotton cloth was strong and clean, and where the paths were kept free of stones. He saw chiefs welcomed by drummers and shell trumpets. He saw that iron was unknown and that knives from the ships amazed every eye. Each of these details pulled his mind forward, yet none proved the map in his head was correct. The first landing was followed by short sails from island to island. Every new harbor promised the next clue that would unlock the route to Asia. He asked about cities built of stone. The replies pointed him toward a larger island that seemed to sit like a kingdom at the center of the sea. He renamed lands with grand titles, planted banners, and read formal words that claimed sovereignty. His men cheered, and the drums on shore kept their own rhythm. Two worlds were measuring each other without a shared rulebook. There were early signs of friction. Metal trinkets drew crowds, and then envy. A borrowed canoe was not returned. A sailor traded for a mask and later said he had been tricked. Small disputes were settled by gestures and laughter, then flared again the next day. The strangers carried steel and armor and a creed of conquest. The islanders carried memory of rival raids and an ethic of gift and welcome. Misread signals multiplied. What began as joyful greeting grew heavy with mistaken meaning. Yet curiosity never released its grip. He wanted a chart that matched what he saw. He wanted proof that the spices of the Indies lay just beyond the next headland. Each night he wrote that the land was rich and the people open-hearted. He sent messengers inland and he questioned pilots who knew the channels and the winds. They guided him by headlands and reefs, not by a globe. That single difference explains why his course looked like a hunt rather than a line. Here is the quiet truth many lessons skip. The first day on shore was not a final discovery. It was the start of a negotiation, a ritual of exchange, and a chase after a theory. He took signs for certainty. When he saw a gold ornament, he pictured Asian mines. When he saw a canoe fleet, he pictured a gate to a famous port. When he heard of a chief who ruled many villages, he pictured an emperor. The gap between what he wanted and what stood before him widened with each hopeful guess. Stay with me. The next landfall reveals the cost of belief and the price of error. The next shore answered his hopes and challenged them at the same time. He found a broad bay, fresh water, and fields that promised a steady harvest. People gathered on the beach with gifts and songs. Chiefs arrived with feathered crowns and belts that glinted in the sun. His journals praised their welcome and their skill at trade. Yet the questions would not rest. Where were the great ports he expected? Where were the carved temples and the markets he had pictured for months at sea? A sudden mishap changed everything. One of the ships grounded in the night and could not be saved. The crew scrambled to recover what they could, and the rest went into the hands of the sea. From loss came a plan. A small post would be built with timber from the wreck, supplied with food, and left under the watch of men who believed fortune was just inland. He pictured a base that would hold his claim and gather proof of riches while he sailed home to report success. But the reality behind this story is even more fascinating. The post sat inside a living web of local power. Neighboring villages had their own rivalries and their own rules for gift and loyalty. The newcomers read smiles as agreements and feasts as alliances. Their hosts read steel blades and bright cloth as proof that the strangers owed respect and restraint. Each side thought the other understood. Each side was wrong. Trade began briskly. Cotton and food crossed one way, tools and bells crossed the other. Scouts set off with local pilots and returned with maps made of memory rather than ink. When they asked again about gold, the answer pointed toward mountains far away. When they asked about cities of stone, the answer named places that the pilots had never seen. Hope stretched across gaps that no one could close with a gesture or word. Here is a pattern that still echoes. The visitors told themselves a tale that fit their plans. The hosts told themselves a tale that fit their customs. On the beach, both tales seemed true. Inside the forest, they began to collide. A basket that was a gift to one man was a debt to another. A borrowed tool that would be returned tomorrow became a theft by nightfall. A warning meant to protect a path was heard as a threat. Small frictions hardened into mistrust. Yet there were moments of real learning. Sailors tried new foods which kept them strong. They learned how to sleep in hammocks and how to move a canoe across a river mouth without overturning. They saw that gardeners could raise more food in a small plot than farms at home might yield in a season. They watched dances that told stories without a single shared word. The truth behind these scenes might surprise you. For a time, both sides were honestly curious. The small post was the test. Men left behind believed they had authority and safety. Their neighbors believed they had guests and limits. Once the flagship turned toward open water, everything changed. The post asked for more than the land would give and for more than the hosts would allow. Strangers who had seemed polite now seemed demanding. Leaders who had seemed calm now seemed proud. The ground that felt secure began to tilt. What came next traveled ahead of the fleet as rumor and memory. The post did not endure. When ships returned, they found a shoreline quiet and a story already set in the minds of the people who lived there. Some of the men had broken trust. Some had wandered where they were told not to go. Some had looked for gold in places that were sacred. The welcome had dissolved. The settlement was gone. The sea erased the fence and the sun bleached the beams. You might ask what Columbus really saw in that moment. He saw that the world he wanted was not the world that met him. He saw that courage at sea did not replace patience on land. He saw that maps made in a study cannot control a beach where two languages try to share one morning. He wrote that more ships and more men would settle the questions. He promised that larger expeditions would sort rumor from reality and would turn guesswork into tribute. There is another lesson hidden in that first walk on the sand. Discovery was not one moment when a single name claimed a place. It was a chain of meetings, each shaped by hunger, pride, fear, and hope. The visitors measured value by metal and power by banners. The islanders measured worth by exchange and power by kinship. Both thought they were generous. Both thought they were strong. Both believed time was on their side. So what did he really see when he stepped ashore? He saw a narrow beach between two oceans. One was the water he crossed. The other was the tide of meaning that rose when strangers tried to fit each other into old stories. On that beach, he mistook signs for promises and wishes for facts. That is why the first landing reads today, like a beginning that did not understand itself. Hold this thought as you close your eyes. The line of gulls, the sound of drums, the first small gifts. The scene is quiet until you realize the map is wrong. The truth behind these events might surprise you. The shore he found was not a door to the Indies. It was a mirror that reflected the hopes he carried and the limits he could not see. That is what he really saw, and it changed the world to come.